contract, will they have to pay the quarterback and surrounding them with pieces? Sure. We're seeing that with Burrow now, and they've taken advantage of the early part of his career. This could be a good game to watch. Let's switch to the
That's right, guys. The schedule for the 2023-2024 season is finally out, and we have a boatload of epic matchups to get to. From the Dolphins and Jets playing in the first Black Friday game, to the Chiefs and Bengals once again going at it just before playoffs on Week 17. But as I was going through the headlines a few weeks ago, I was wondering, what technically would be the biggest matchup? What game in the next upcoming season is going to be the most watched game? Well, to answer that question, let's head on inside. Welcome to NFL Study Hall. Now, instead of me walking around South Florida and telling you about this experiment, I thought we could make it a little bit more interactive. So let's take out this apartment and bring in something foreshadowing. And then blur it for video quality. There we go. Before we start looking at this year's most watched games, let's take a look back at the top 50 games from 2022. And cue the Jeopardy music. Wow, great spread last season. Now just to be clear, this is only regular season games. Basically any postseason game will have more viewers than what you see on this list, which makes sense considering there are fewer games and more things at stake. So just looking at weeks 1 through 18, you'll notice that the most watched game in 2022 with a staggering 40 million plus viewers was the Giants versus the Cowboys on week 12. This was the late Thanksgiving game. And just below it, just over 30 million views, was the Bills versus the Lions, the early Thanksgiving game. Unfortunately, this pretty much answers our question. Considering how much more popular these two games were compared to the rest of the season, I expect to see the same results come November, especially when you think about how the Cowboys are playing the Commanders and the Lions are going against the rival Packers. Now, before I looked at the rest of this chart, I came up with 9 different variables that I thought would affect a viewer watching a certain game. And those variables run under 3 different categories: who, when, and where. The who obviously starts with who played in these games. Well, if you look at just the top 10, you'll already start to see a trend. With a staggering 7 appearances are the Dallas Cowboys. No! Also in the top 10 are the Green Bay Packers with 3 appearances and the Buffalo Bills with 2 appearances. In fact, if you take all these teams on this graph and put them in their appearances in the top 50, you'll notice that in first place, the Cowboys have 12, followed by the Packers with 10, the Chiefs with 8, and the Bills and Bucks with 7. One thing to note before we move on is that there are 5 teams that never cracked this list: the Texans, the Falcons, the Browns, the Cardinals, and the Ravens. This shocked me a little since Houston and Atlanta are big cities with lots of fans, and lots of fans should equal more viewers, right? Well, not exactly, and this is my second variable. Now, there's no real way we can calculate number of fans per team because as football fans, we like to follow and watch all the teams. But if we were to strictly go off of social media users following a given team, your rankings would look like this. Now, let's just say we took a game and we combined the 2 teams' social media following rankings. For instance, our number 1 game last year was the Cowboys versus Giants. That score would be a 10. If our theory is correct, the most popular games will have a smaller score and then they will grow in unpopularity. After those calculations for our top 50 games last year, the graph looks like this.
Are you sure about that?
So if social media has nothing to do with whether a game is watched, then maybe winning is. You look at some of those games on our leaderboard and a lot of them were between some of the best teams in the league last year. Well, here we might find some answers. 33 of the top 50 games last year had a combined winning record. 10 had tying records, and only 7 games had combined losing records. So I think it's safe to say that in our game in 2023, it will include winning teams. Now we get into our second category, and that is when. This includes the week, the date, the day of the week, and the time of day. The weeks of the season with the most games in the top 50 were week 1, opening weekend, week 12, Thanksgiving, and week 17 and 18, the end of the season. And if you look at the rest of the year, it seems that the end of the season is a little bit more popular than the beginning. Regarding date, we'll consider the month, and December dominates that category. Now this surprised me a little because I always thought that October and November were more prime football months. But this actually makes a lot of sense because in December, baseball just wrapped up their season, college football is a little weaker in their bowl season, and basketball is in mid-season. The day of the week is pretty self-explanatory. The NFL is a Sunday sport, so it dominates the ratings. The time of day is one that I thought to be pretty interesting. More than half of the games in the top 50 last year happened in the late afternoon.
Stop it. Get some help.
While only 17 games were at night. Goes to show you that prime time is not so prime of a time. The final category in our study is where. Now, instead of me looking up all the cities and states and putting up 50 different locations on the screen, I think it'd be easier to think of things in terms of time zone, because time zone also determines when a viewer is going to watch the game in their home. And if we lay them out right here, it's clear that the Eastern time zone has things taken care of. Probably because most NFL teams are located in the Eastern time zone. But not only is where a geographical location, it's also a location on the screen, the network. There are 4 different channels the NFL runs on: CBS, Fox, NBC, and ESPN. Now last year they also did use Amazon Prime for their Thursday night games, but not one of those games cracked the top 10. Of the other 4, Fox reigns supreme with 19 games in the top 50, followed in a tie by CBS and NBC. This shouldn't surprise us because we've already determined that the most popular games are ones on Sunday late afternoon, and the majority of those games are dominated by either Fox or CBS. So, now that we've gone through all the different variables and categories to watching an NFL game, let's combine all of our data. We are looking for a game that includes the Dallas Cowboys versus another winning team during week 17 or 18 in December on a Sunday late afternoon, played on the East Coast and broadcasted on Fox. Now, in order to narrow our margin for the upcoming season, I think the best way to do it is to look straight at the end of the Cowboys schedule. And immediately, these 4 games stick out. Now, when I first saw this list, my eyes were instantly drawn to the 2 primetime games versus the Philadelphia Eagles and the Detroit Lions. Both these games, the Cowboys should be facing off against winning opponents, and both would have huge NFC playoff implications. But considering what we know about how primetime games significantly decrease your opportunity to make the top of the charts, I think the better bet is the Buffalo game. Outside of the week it's played on, which is week 15, this game matches all of our criteria. It's the Dallas Cowboys going against a winning opponent, or at least they should be. It's late in the season, it's played in December, it's going to be on a Sunday afternoon, late afternoon, it's going to be played on the East Coast, Buffalo, New York, and it's going to be televised on Fox. Not only do I think this whole thing makes sense on paper, but that matchup between Josh Allen and Dak Prescott is sure to draw attention. So, ladies and gentlemen, what will be the most watched game in the 2023-2024 season? Well, outside of the first 2 Thanksgiving games, I'm thinking everyone is going to be wanting to watch the Battle of Blue on week 15 in Orchard Park. Time for a trick shot.
Let's go! Peace out, y'all.